The first 3 weeks of the eruption here in Hawaii, crazy things would happen in the middle of the night. A new fissure would open up and it would threaten a new neighborhood. Thousands of people were evacuated from their homes. I started the Hawaii Tracker Facebook group to help people understand what's going on and get their questions answered.
Hey, how's it going? We're live. This is Fissure 20.
We had hundreds of people all throughout the neighborhoods sending in videos, articles, and images. We spend a lot of time making sure the accurate information gets out.
This is live. There's still lava moving.
They weren't just sharing a story, they were helping their neighbor. If a family was being evacuated, my group would just jump in and help out. So it was huge. They were watching out for each other.
Hello everybody, thank you for coming. Thank you for the support from everybody.
As we go through this, we're growing closer together as a community. When tragedies like this strike, you really realize how much you need each other.
We are the Hawaiian Volcano Education and Resilience Institute, HVERI for short. A lot of people know us from the 2018 eruption of Kīlauea in the Lower East Rift Zone. Working under Hawaii Tracker on the Facebook group. Since then, we've been trying to carry on and take the lessons, the hard lessons that were learned during that eruption and try and prepare for the next major disaster that comes to our island.
Yeah, so we do that through two different programs. One is volcano education, and the other part is digital resilience, which we address through online groups on social media. So the way the two programs work together is that the social media networks end up being a distribution pathway for all the information. And having that network in place means we can provide more than just volcano education, but any other preparedness information as well.
What we were working for really came about in the Mauna Loa eruption in 2022. Within hours of that eruption starting, we had the mayor, Mitch Roth, we had USGS HVO Ken Hahn on the stream trying to help flush out a little bit of the ongoing because it's so new. It's completely different from our previous major eruption, which was 2018.
One of the things that Talmadge and I were talking about was how do we deal with social media? It was something we needed to figure out and get right. Our job is to get information to the public and make sure that the public get it as well as possible and as correctly as possible. When Philip and Dane started coming to and live streaming the meetings, it was great because we were reaching more people than we normally would. So when the eruption actually happened, we had this relationship. The interviews we did during the eruption, the most fun ones were the ones with Philip and Dave because they were more relaxed, and we knew we were getting to the local community, and people were asking questions. So those were the best. I think I just want to really give a shout out to those guys and how we worked as a team on this eruption. It really worked out well, and we got to a lot of people we wouldn't have normally gotten.
Hello everyone, and welcome to our Hawaiian Volcano Tracker for February 19th, 2026. We are HVERI, the nonprofit Hawaiian Volcano Education and Resilience Institute. I'm geologist Philip Ong, joined today by Mr. Lou Torre and Dane DuPont. How are you guys today? How about you, Lou, since I can't hear Dane?
Yeah, I'm doing good. All good on my end. Episode 42 in the books, and it was a little different than the last ones. Not just volcano wise, but just island wide. Wow, kind of different. So we'll talk about that as we get going. But all good. Dane, you back?
Yeah, and at least this one the winds were cooperating a little bit more. The one previous, winds really caused some problems. Not so much with this last one.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah, we'll cover episode 42 today, the impact of it, or a lack of as much impact because of the weaker winds, like these gentlemen said. And yeah, pretty similar. We've done this 41 times already before today. So it's a little bit of a practiced routine by now. Anything you guys want to add before we get into it?
No, let her rip.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, let's get ourselves ready for our summary here. It's going to be okay, Dan? You need to flip this around.
I'm good. What's up?
All right.
Oh, switch us around. Sorry. There we go.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. This is our Hawaiian Volcano Summary for February 19th, 2026. After a 21-day pause, Kīlauea summit eruption resumed with the onset of episode 42 on Sunday, February 15th at 1:50 p.m. That lasted about 10 hours, after which we've had the resumption of the pause and continuing gas emissions from the two vents, the north and south vents you see on the live stream shown here. But to pull us back to last Sunday, here is a time lapse taken from the V3 camera showing the glow over the previous night, a few small overflows that began on Valentine's Day, progressing to the dual fountains from both the north and south vents that produced those big flows crossing the crater floor. Here's a view from the KW camera with a vent at the right, showing a big channel, putting a big flow across the crater floor before it's diverted closer to the camera there. And you might notice that the actual lava flows keep moving after the flow has stopped and crossing the crater floor for another day and a half following the end of fountaining. From the other side of the crater, the B1 camera looks like this. The fountains are back on the left over here. And you can see the challenge of the rainy weather to visual observations during this most recent episode 42. There's a big flow coming around. We see a small ooze-up flow in this sequence as well from the middle of the crater floor before everything quiets down as rain continues for the following few days. This did produce a tall cloud of volcanic emissions. This is a view from Mauna Loa summit showing recent snowfall. And here in the background is the plume from Kīlauea's eruption, which can be clearly seen rising above the 14,000 foot point of view here, with the USGS reporting cloud heights from the National Weather Service up to 35,000 feet. So fortunately, we had strong trade winds, which kept most of the fallout to the southwest, as shown by this episode 42 impact map shown by the USGS here, with events in the southwest part of the crater and the deposits of fallout all in a closed area of the Kau Desert for the most part, with some smaller tephra pieces reported in downwind communities such as Pahala, Nāʻālehu, and Punaluʻu, shown here. So overall, only light tephra was reported compared to episode 41. The biggest difference being the presence of trade winds as opposed to light winds during the previous episode there. So that's the text update from the SGS with all those details of the report. Overall, this episode 42 was slightly shorter in this peak fountain heights compared to the previous one. But because it lasted slightly longer, it put out a little bit more volume, the third largest volume of any episode during a year-plus eruption thus far. But in net, it put out a similar, though slightly reduced discharge rate to episode 41. So still quite a lot of lava coming out, part of this high discharge population we've seen in recent months here. And since then, the volcano has shown signs of its regular recharge for the first 2 days following episode 42. What you might see here in this very far right end is over the last day, there's been a very slight deflation, which has stalled out this process. And this is curious, this is happening a little earlier than in previous recharge cycles here. Still, the USGS has their most recent update today with a forecast window of March 5th through the 20th, pending more data of inflation on the tilt meter there. And so that's a 2-week window from 2 weeks from now to 4 weeks from now. And just to recap, all the activity as far as flows has been within the crater with a tephra impact outside to the southwest for the most part. There was a big emission of sulfur dioxide caught by the satellites, as shown here, that flew off to the south for the most part of the island. However, VOG still continues being produced from the volcano even during the current pause, and that is affecting downwind communities to the southwest of Hawaii Island as well as the interior of the island as well. That's the VOG forecast dashboard from the VMAP. And here we can see the Purple Air Citizen Science Monitoring Network showing increased emission rates, especially downwind in the areas of Pahala, where you can see this chart here shows several forays into the yellow and even close to the red in the past few hours here. Earthquakes have been pretty quiet over the past week, continuing in small numbers under the summit and south flank, as well as the Pahala feeder zone deeper in that blue color, being fed by the hotspot. Overall, the earthquake counts are down per day, as seen here in this graph for the last month, and that's continuing the reduction of the band. The shallow band of earthquakes that we saw was higher earlier in the month with increased recharge and impending flattening of the volcano. So that's our Hawaiian volcano summary for this week. All right, so that said, let's pull it back to our hazard summary, which is going to be a lot of talk about the weather here. And so we'll start with our KP camera on the side of Mauna Loa looking south. You saw some rain clouds come through. You can see here the flash at nighttime where it does illuminate that plume a little bit higher, but just to start off, you can see how rainy and obscured it is. It's hard to tell whether that glow is the fresh outburst of lava or the clearing of the weather. In any case, what you can see through here, let me put this on a loop here. What you can see through here is that this high cloud is leaning to the right when you do see it here, much of the later times. Okay, so maybe you can pull it back here to one of these frames where we actually can see it here. So here's one of the earlier ones. Early on, you see there is some hint of it wanting to go to the east towards people, higher concentration of residences in that area, but very quickly it gets caught by the trade winds and continues blowing towards Kau Desert to the right of the screen here. That's the main story. It's hard to see it everywhere, but as we've shown you before, here's a Mauna Loa camera. Let's put this on a loop and let me zoom it in to this back quadrant here so you can see this a little more clearly. Right, so here comes the burst. There it is. And you see it kind of come up and spread out a little bit. We don't really see it trailing to the left of the screen like we saw in episode 41. But it still certainly did reach quite high. So it's not for lack of plume height that we didn't have a tephra fallout. It's probably that lighter material didn't make it to those higher elevations because it got caught in the winds lower down by the ground. Mauna Kea camera. There's a little bit of snow on Mauna Loa right up here. But here is Kīlauea in this area right in here. You see the cloud seems to come across the field of view right when it starts to, the plume starts to rise. That's how it goes with these far mountain cameras. But there you see a little bit of that pattern. Let me see if I can rewind that for you guys as well. One of the better views here. Coming up. And there are a couple frames in here. Look at that one there. And you start to see this come up. It does seem to have some indication of maybe it wants to go to the east. In fact, that caused the USGS to put out a second volcanic activity notice in the middle of the eruption. saying that above 18,000 feet, the winds were blowing from the south, from the west and southwest, posing potential threat, but that did not come to pass. So a little later in the frames here, you see the glow in the sky, but nothing really convincing as far as blowing towards the communities that got the fallout of 41 last month. So again, there is that map of the fallout to the southwest and over there. Oh, that's within a national park. There are communities to the southwest of here that did get the Pele's hair and finer material that's not being picked up by this satellite laser measurement. This is all catching really the big stuff. So you can see the fallout range of that pretty well into the desert here in Kau. But coming to our live cameras, I'm showing you guys just daytime views. We'll start off before the eruption here, by which time the trade winds have been back in full force. So you see all the gas blowing away from the camera. The eruption comes, most of the tephra blows away, the gas continues coming out, and it continues blowing in that same direction pretty consistently over the last week here. So that's been a welcome change of pace for the weather and impact from the volcano. Let's go to the V3 camera now. Reverse angle there. Here's our south vent and north vents, both fuming heavily. And here to start out the sequence before the eruption on the 13th, they are fuming a little bit less, but still fuming, glowing, rising up, overflowing. All this time, the gas blowing to the left of the screen, which is our focus for this particular segment here. So lots of interesting stuff happening there. The lava flows moving after the fountain cuts off, but really it's this pattern of the gases, no matter which frame I pull this to, blowing from center to the left of the screen here. And finally, from the V2 camera, this is the volcano house view. So a little bit more obscured by rain and fog. You see a little bit of variation in plume from that far distance, blocked out. You can see the gas blowing kind of that way or up and over, but otherwise obscured. And you can see in this case that this fog in the foreground is not caused by the actual volcanic gas. It's the weather coming in. That can be confusing sometimes. All right, so the VOG measurement and prediction program out of University of Hawaii at Manoa, VMAP, VOG forecast dashboard here, starting off with our sulfur dioxide flavor of pollutant, the pure gas emitted from the volcano, with its impact largely to the southwest here. You can see all the way to Ocean View and beyond, maybe Captain Cook Lee area down in there, as well as always Pahala and Nāʻālehu in between here, right? And it seems like there's a little bit of a change in wind here towards the end of this forecast period. That might be in 2 days from now, or it does seem to swing a little bit more to the north here. And so there might be some changing winds during the next week, which even with these low-level emissions could bring some VOG into nearby communities. Right? People in Ocean View and Pahala have to live with that and this fallout of Pele's hair all the time. And the rest of us may forget unless it's really coming back into our sphere of observation here. So keep reminding ourselves here. That's pure SO2. If we go to the SO4 layer, that's the stuff that lingers a little bit longer because it reacts in the atmosphere and forms these aerosol particles. And so there you see a similar pattern in distribution. It goes southwest, wraps around, but also you see some coming to the north later on. Current conditions from the state air quality data site. Green most places, but not in Hilo, are showing 2 yellow signatures, Hilo and Kīlauea. And that is probably not from the volcano, but from some other factor there, given the wind directions. Purple air, Citizen Science Monitoring Network, showing all greens, even in the Hilo area, volcano area, and even down here in Pahala. When I loaded this earlier in preparation for our broadcast here, I clicked on this site that appears to be the Picken and Grinnin Farm in Wood Valley. You can see it actually had peaked into the red here at that point in time, right, over 150 on the reading there. So see, it comes and goes depending on the wind direction, coming and going. So the wind changed And now they're in a clear again, but these guys have impacts likely every single day. Right down here. You can go to ocean view and probably see a similar pattern. Maybe it doesn't reach quite as high into the red, but you see the impacts of the gas coming in and out as well there. I'll zoom that in for you guys too. All right, come back out and go to the National Park website for their summary showing everything in green currently, island-wide and in the main Kīlauea part of the park. And the charts also show everything in a green for all of the historical period captured here in the last 48 hours, I believe. So not much else to see there apart from consistent trade winds. If you see the summary here, we also see the wind direction north-northeast at 9 miles an hour. Oh, there's a little bit something weird going on with our shading going on here. Right? Normally the circle was here in the middle, and yeah. Anyways, let that be, and move on to our mounts page. So the mounts project is indexing satellite data for volcanoes all over the world. Here's its automatic page for Kīlauea. I'm selecting the SO2 layer here for the last week. And so starting about a week ago, here we see in this frame just the effect of SO2 high in the atmosphere to the north from that southerly wind we'd had the previous week. But as the winds changed, we saw there on, it's likely the 12th here in Hawaii, trade wind pattern with winds distributed to the southwest. 12th, 13th, 14th, the day of the eruption would be the 15th. This is all UTC, so this is capturing the plume a few hours after it's put out in the atmosphere here and drifts to the south of the island. You can see that's the big one there. And since then, we have had just a little bit in the high atmosphere on the edge of the island there and locally by the volcano. So it really helps when it rains a lot to clear the air out. Sometimes it can be intense enough where you get some acid rain coming through there at the same time, but it's been raining enough that that stuff is also getting flushed out and diluted by the rain that comes after, right? It's just been pretty rainy for the past week. So that is the conditions close to the ground. And one final VOG slide here. This is the windy.com layer for SO2, showing the concentration of SO2 in the atmosphere around us. You can see where it left our island, went southeast, and wrapped around, getting pulled towards this low up here. So there you go, and how it fits in the grand pattern of everything else occurring on the globe. In the Pacific, Kīlauea is dominating the SO2 signal here. Once again. All right. So we're going to go now to the Volcano Watch. Just going to switch things up a little bit here. Volcano Watch this week is a sight to see maintaining HVO's webcams during a historic eruption. So this is posted on all of our streams here for you guys to see. And just goes back to note the importance of pure visual observation to telling the stories of volcanoes, right? So back to Vesuvius and Pliny the Younger, to Native Hawaiians, to within the last couple of decades, we now have webcams, right? Which are great because it used to be that I tell this, say this probably too often, but it used to be when I first came to the USGS as a volunteer, we'd hike out for 2 or 4 miles just to look for like a pixel of red in the fog and in the clouds. And now we don't have to do that. We can say that we can see through the camera that there's still lava there. It's still erupting. It's not erupting. It's glowing. It's venting. It's not venting. All these details we never really had in this detail, unless someone was camped out in front of the thing before. So we've always celebrated webcams. They are a big part of what we do is using them to make time lapses. So I thought we would just put this tribute to the webcams here right up front, up top, and then show you guys what we do with the webcams after this, right, in various ways here. So that'll be our observations. Starting off with a live V1 camera. There it is, degassing from the north vent in the foreground, presumably also the south vent, but it's kind of obscured by all this fume. It's hard to see back in there past that. Maybe back in here, yeah, some venting going on. That's the V1 live view. The V2 back from the volcano house angle, showing a bit of this downdrop block on the foreground with several steam vents all blowing off to the southwest, as well as crater floor, and the vents themselves also putting out a big billowy white plume today. V3, the opposite angle. And there you can see a little bit more distinction between north vent and south vent, both putting out quite a bit of gas. And that's the views as they are currently. We'll kind of go in reverse order here. We're at the V3 camera. What does it look like since the episode ended? So the nighttime views. There's been some glow and some movement of the flows still over several nights. That's the V3. The V2 from Volcano House, similar view, but farther away. So more obstruction of view, more fog. But you see some signals of those little flows there as well. Well, as the V1 shows the closer flows on the north side of the north vent there, and that continuing glow from both vents, sometimes intermittent there. So that's how it's looked since then. Coming back to the episode itself, there are reports from the USGS of overflows beginning back on Valentine's Day. So here we are, Valentine's Day, just before noon, with the first little flows, first couple bigger flows overflowing before the main event comes the following day on the 15th. And here comes the 16th. We still see continuing movement in the middle of the crater, but also some slumping from the side of the cone itself as well over here, showing this flow that is still active today. Moving over there. Invisible, this is the KW camera, a little bit wider view, going back to the first overflows as well. There they are, and with the glow continuing. Just a small part of the crater here to start. A couple more flashes there, small flows before daybreak comes. And then around noon is when you start seeing the first overflows. Around 1 o'clock, they become more continuous. Rain comes in, and there comes a fountain. You see one big channel feeding over to the central part of the crater. And you see it diverts here and starts pouring over towards the bottom part of the screen here. Something just reported. See the vents are shut off, and the flow is still moving, creeping around the edge of the crater over here to the far eastern side. So pretty impressive stuff. Let me pull it back to in here. And one thing you can see is when this first flow comes out, it pushes forward with this material. Let me pull it back here. You can see this. It pushes forward here, but there's some slumping of the side of the cone here that gets cut up, and there's like almost like a slurry of this fresher lava and bits of cone in here that seems to slow down. And the lava trying to move in that direction, seeing that slowdown, actually hits it and diverts and jumps to make a big new flow coming off in this direction there. So it looks something. Let's see if I can just play it from here and zoom in on this area. You can see there it goes, and then here comes the spillover. One more time further back. And there you can see right there, that chunk right there that ends up right in here.
Hey, Phil.
Yeah.
You said this was the third largest flow?
Third largest volume.
Volume.
By the USGS. Yeah. Yeah, and really the episode 3, which is the largest volume, is almost 2-week long episode, right? So that one is unique and special. So really, in this more modern one, it's the second largest of the big ones we've had, following 38, which was a little bit larger.
38 was a quick one though, wasn't it? Or was that one that hung on? This one felt like it just hung on forever.
Yeah, 38 was pretty similar, right? And actually, the durations haven't been that different. I'll get into that one later. It's more just the fact that we have both vents going again, both the north and south vents with dual fountains. That's what makes the biggest difference overall. And so the output rate was still equally high, maybe slightly less, but pretty similar overall. We'll get into those numbers in a bit. So that was KW. Here's V1, showing the first overflows there, spattering overnight. And then coming to daytime, you actually see a little bit of the inner cone building in there before the main vent comes up, shuts off. And then a little bit of slumping in the cone visible right here. Movement of all the material all across the crater floor here. And still glowing a bit as it does so over the following night. So we'll keep moving, let's say, clockwise around the crater there. So from that V1 camera in a closed area, this is the closest people could come, the Wikahuna overlook. And you can see they actually can see the one of the vents glowing from the camera now up here. All the people coming in. You can see it's rainy. You see the fountain lighting up that wet pavement down there. It's pretty impressive. And continuing gas there. So even though it was wet, people who braved the park were able to get close views of it right up here. Well, likely they got wet too. The V2 camera from Volcano House area, a little bit more obscured. Those big rain bursts might have created complete blockages at time. But there were gaps, as you can see through here, where you could see some of the spilling over, some of the fountaining, especially later into the night there. And continuing some of the flows the following day and night as well, as that mass of lava kept creeping across the crater floor. So that's the V2. We'll come around to the S2 camera, which looks like it could use a little cleaning or something here to start. Maybe it's some fogged up, but fortunately a big rain shower comes in right before the fountain start and washes it off, and we get a little bit clearer view there. Not as high resolution as our other feeds, but I like to put this in here just to remind us of how far the USGS has come when they're live cameras, time-lapse cameras, web cameras, right? You know, the whole thing has been quite a progression, really, right, of monitoring over the last couple of decades here. So finally, the V3 camera. Oh, put it back at the start here. There it is with its first overflow. Here comes some more overflows, little ones, and then comes some big ones around noon, and then comes the big fountains. And there you can see the relative size of the fountains. The south vent fountain was actually a little bit taller than the north vent fountain. I'll pull it back again. It starts off with the north vent fountain higher first, as you can see there. And then it switches over to the south vent once it catches up. And sees all the way off the screen in that view right there. V-shaped fountains. Pretty impressive stuff. And vents shut off. Look at all this material moving. There's quite a bit of it moving down in this direction. Must be a big slope. But you see it everywhere, really, right? Little specks of incandescence from this angle, but near camera, you see how much it's actually molten on the inside and fluid and mobile, even if it looks cool on the outside there. So that's the webcam. So I'll just throw one more thing in here before we bring in Lou for some other live observations here. This USGS has a photo and video chronology release from the 16th for episode 42, Fountains and Fallout. And so there are some images of the views from, let's make this bigger here. The view from the Kīlauea Desert, where you can see the two fountains side by side. There is a south vent fountain, north vent fountain, and a south vent fountain, and all the tephra that's falling into the desert behind it. You can see a little bit of the shape of that hill that's built behind there. That's completely obscured by all this tephra dust that's falling down. Slightly different angle there, similar to the webcams there. You can see all the tephra dust once again, all blowing over the cone. And there you see that first moment of the burst of lava out of its channel. And you can see them actually recounting here. It's a photo by Mike Zoller. And they note the redirection of the channel Subsequent analysis of time-lapse imagery indicates the shift was caused by slow slumping of the entire flank of the vent complex, resulting in failure of the original channel levee on the north side. So you see him catching it there at that moment. And that massive high plume up into the sky there. At this time, to over 20,000 feet, 6,000 meters. And closer in, a view of all the fragmentation of lava from the fountain itself. And then it falls back onto the crater floor, coalesces into flows, which will creep and move downhill. And there you see more of them as well, seeing how they're actually cooling to be dark on the outside before they're landing and amalgamating into those bigger flows. So it looks like we might have had some visiting scientists this past week at the USGS with a few extra pictures and focus on class here. But it's great to have those interests highlighted as well. So there's some of those flows being fed by the spatter fallout there, and front right here in the foreground. Twin fountains, south vent, north vent, similar in height. And closer in the base of both fountains, with that narrow gap in between them, right there. This is an interesting thing to note. On the south side of the north fountain on the right there, a very small third fountain was active with frequent bubble bursting, as noted by Matt Patrick there. And there may be one of the more classic, iconic views, nighttime view of the north and south vents, fountains, south vent taller, all those flows across the crater floor and from the tephra fallout, all together there. And it looks like since I last loaded this, they added this video. Let's see if this will load and play for us here. With a little slower time lapse of that fountain onset that we just saw. And that redirection right there. The fan out. And there's one visual. Where's my, I think I missed my B1 camera. I'm gonna throw that one in here in a minute here. So that's really interesting. See that progression a little slower. Here is Pahala, Pele's hair on vehicle windshields there. Pahala High School, the day after episode 42 ended. And someone using their hand to show the tangled strands of tephra there in Pahala. So quite a bit of material still being produced, right? It's just because it's not falling on most of us. Doesn't mean it's still not falling on some of us that really could use the rest of our help. All right, so that's the photochronology. And let me throw in one last thing I forgot to put in here, Lou, which is the B1 camera view. Goes right here. All right, and this is showing the fountains there in the background. Here come the flows. You see there's one arm coming this way. A bigger flow comes over here, wraps around. The fountain's cut off. It's still moving, breaking open. And still the next day it's moving. Come some rainbows with some rain. And by the following evening, when dark comes again, you can still see a little bit of glow from this flow right there, but not nearly as much. It's mostly stopped. But what I wanted to point out, let's pull it back to right in here. Make this a little slower. And zoom it in. You guys can see what I'm going for right here, that little speck, right? Let's go right here in the middle. Here's the main arm of the flow. Right there, in the middle of the crater floor, far from any flow, lava starts erupting, starts making a small pad. It gets overrun by the main flow, so you don't see any trace of it any longer beyond that. But we did have an ooze-up flow confirmed here, only because we were able to see it in the darkness of night there come up, right? And so at the same time as the lava is moving, whether that was from the weight of the lava on top of this crust pushing something around, or some injection below the crust, like where lava is pressurizing to shoot the fountains up. Maybe you can pressurize, inject beneath this crust as well. But in any case, we can tell it's happening at the same time in this case, and not before or after. And, in fact, if I were to show you daily views of the B1 and a KW cameras, you really don't see any kind of change day to day. So I'm not even going to bother showing them to you guys today. There's no movement in the crater floor, but just that one sign of ooze up right there. All right, Lou, that's all the observations I can pull from these every 15-minute frames of camera, right?
Yep.
And you've gone through the actual live streams themselves and different resolution there.
Yeah, and you caught one that I missed there. I missed that that ooze out in the middle. Nice work. I don't know if we would have seen that if it was daylight.
Right. Yeah, there's no sign of movement on the crater floor. It happened just before the flow overran it, right? Like it's a really easy thing to overlook there. But
all right, so 42 was interesting. We took off up there about an hour after it started going fountain style on us, and of course it's just dumping rain. We knew what we were getting into going up there. We can see it in the cameras, but shot for it anyway. We actually went out to the out to Waikahuna, Kīlauea Overlook, and no viz. You can hear everything, and it was just too much. By that time, the park was, it was pretty much a parade from outside the park when we got there all the way to KMC where we parked. If you are planning to go to the park for any of these episodes, leave now. Honestly, it is brutal. It is brutal, but we'll get into that later with the community corner. This was definitely the fountain show of jetting that was going on, and you're going to see that in these observations as we go. You can see in the south vent there, it continually just drops and kicks back up, drops and kicks back up, and it did this pretty much nonstop. Luckily, we had enough visibility from the USGS cams, and even though the V3 was acting off, I cut it a little bit here and there to help us out. Word on the hill is that they've ordered a new one, and they'll have that in place. V1 is also doing it, so I'm not sure that's the complete reason why we're catching the issues. Could be other problems, but they will sort it out. You know that. I sped this
short
up.
right there. Yeah.
Yep.
And it goes back up. And you can see that little fountain in the middle of the two of them right there.
We're going to get there. Hold on, Phil. We're going to get there. Yeah. See that big push right there? This was the one one of the bigger ones that I was able to, one of our mods grabbed this and put this up for us. And so I put this in here. That was probably one of the bigger ones. I left at regular speed right there so you can actually see what's going on. Incredible.
It's reminiscent of when we saw some of those eruption onsets in the past, like crater floor just ripping open and just a huge plume shooting out, big bursts of gas along with it.
So this was the point that that intermediate vent, is that what we're calling this? Is that we're back to intermediate?
Sure. Yeah. Why not?
Okay. We're right there. And so that's when she opened up. Tephra obviously is what we've been experiencing. So there's the tephra rain that's coming down, and that little vent there just making itself known. Sped this up, and you can start to see all the overflow that was coming from the south vent kind of dropping over the ledges. I thought that was a nice shot. And here we go. This is the end right here. So go ahead, Phil.
Okay, yeah. And that last one, you had like the north vent looked like actually a little bit inclined a little bit too, huh?
Yeah. Let's pull that back right there.
All right, it's like leaning to the right there.
It does move throughout the episode, but it didn't move a lot this time. We've seen that thing shooting, 30, 45 degrees. So here's the last three cams of the end, and this is what we've been talking about, how the last hour or so, 30 minutes, was just heavy drop push, drop, push, drop, push. This is coming off of the V1 cam right here.
Yeah, a lot of gas-rich burst with a little bit of lava spray in it.
Well, yeah, that gas on the south vent looks more like that jet, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there were reports after it was all over it. There was continuing flaming happening from the vents, right?
Yep.
For the next night as well. There's some of it.
Here we go over to the V3 camera.
Yeah, really big changes in height right there, yeah, from the south vent. Can't really see the top of it from there, can you?
No. Nope.
No. Yeah, this is the second time we've seen this. We saw it at the end of 41 briefly also, and it was reported. We've been looking for it for a while because it was reported from the Punaluʻu eruption from something like 4 of its final 7 episodes. And so that leads to the question of what's changed to make this happen, and might it mean similar to Punaluʻu? And I'm not convinced of that, but interesting question.
So here coming from the V2 cam is a little, I guess, conditions weren't great during this part of the night. This was actually, we were up there during the last, couple hours of it. We left just before this. We were wet enough, but pretty amazing that the V2 cam was able to catch that right there, because the V2 is a great camera when it has visibility. And then we back that up a little bit there. It's a good cam, and that definitely demonstrates that gas. And you can actually see the height on it.
Yeah, and you can see the same that north vent, one last burst from it also before it shuts off. The south vent's almost done. There is north vent high, and then it backs off, and that's it.
Yeah, this is a shot from us that we took up at Waikahuna in the rain, pouring rain. Waikahuna was actually closed off several different times. They weren't allowing traffic up there. This was us getting into the park probably an hour and a half after the fountaining started. Nonstop. That's getting through the gate. When we were going in through the gate, it wasn't too bad. There was only about 5 cars or so out on the highway in each direction. You're going to see in a second when we left the park what it was like. Parking was a mess. I don't know what they can do up there to help. There were so many people. There were so many people that they could not charge or check cards getting into the park. They just have to let you in.
Yeah, it backs up on the highway. It becomes a safety issue, right?
It's a major safety issue. And this is the highway going out that night at 10:30, 11 o'clock, somewhere around there. And it was for miles and miles. I want to say it was probably almost down Mauna Loa Estates, maybe. It just kept going and going. So many cars. And this was, I don't even know if these people would actually even be able to see the end by the time they got in there, because it's just a parade. So there are some of our observations. You're going to see a couple more shots coming up in the community corner in a little bit. But Phil, want to take us through monitoring?
No, actually, let's do community corner.
Oh, let's do it. All right.
Yeah.
There we go. All right. This week, we have a few things going on. Not a lot, but we can go through there. Still things happening in the park. Are they opening and closing at different times? Weather, personnel, you're going to have to go to the KMC Welcome Center to really get an idea of what's happening at that time, because it's changing constantly. You can check the website. I can't guarantee that it's going to be active. Best thing to do is go into the Welcome Center. Here's a shot from our friend Jen Myers. She was on her way over. She caught that from her flight. There's that plume right there on the other side of Mauna Kea. It's a great shot. This is a shot here that I took when we were up one day over at the Kīlauea Iki overlook, looking over at the vents. And I pulled this off of our Hawaii tracker shot right there, going straight across. So some people were asking, hey, what's it going to look like when it's going? And that's pretty much it. We actually filmed their episode 35, maybe. So It's a great spot if you just want to sit in your car, stay warm, and if you have a parking spot, you can see right across the caldera. There's your viewing areas. These are all great. There's not a real bad place unless you can't find parking. So commit and be flexible. Can you say that? Can you say that together? Commit and be flexible. There's our welcome center up top. Drive on all the way through the park. You can't miss it. There are signs everywhere. Parking is back behind the new HVO building. Try not to park in spots right in front of cabins. They don't. People staying there don't really like that too much. There's your ranger desk for your stuff. There's a shot of our visitor center that's underway. It's actually getting roofed right now, so that'll be nice. An outdoor pavilion. We were talking up there, and this is really the, other than down at Helena Poly, or if you go up Mauna Loa Road, there's not really any other covered areas to just hang out. So this will be a nice addition down there at the visitor center. And that is a shot of our bathrooms that are going in. Yes, right there. They switch sides. If you are familiar with that area, they used to be on the other side. That is our new HVO facility, probably one of the nicest buildings on this island. That crew deserves it. Like Phil was saying, you guys all spent a lot of time hiking miles and miles. And I don't know if we have. I have to try to find it. There was a really cool shot with 4 or 5 of them out during this episode, out on the ledge, doing what they do. Good for them to have a nice facility going in up there. Last I heard, it should be open in March, but if you know how things work around here, if it happens by June, we're all happy. Parking in designated areas. They're everywhere. Just hard to find. Go slow and hope for the best. Stay hydrated. We didn't really have a problem up there this time because it was raining, but there isn't water available in bottle filling stations. But Volcano House sells water. KMC, they have the Lava Lounge there. They also have MWR, the Rangers. Welcome Center has water for sale in there. Look around. You can find some water if you didn't bring it, but I recommend bringing it. If you're up there all day, bring a hat. There's our girl right there. I know you guys are waiting for the dogs, aren't you? Hold on, Dane. Hold on. All right.
It's in the chat. Look, no dogs.
No dogs. Let's see if I can turn my page here. Is it not turning? There it is. Here they come. You guys, some of them have already seen this. You don't get new dogs till next week, so you got to tune in next week. I don't think Dane saw this one. That's why we have to show it tonight. There you go, Dane.
Oh my god.
There we go. Yep, a little fun with AI. Hey, well, they do have some programs going on at the park. This is what's going on down at the Kahuku unit on February 21st. Right there. I don't have the right write-up in there for some reason. Houston Vandergrift, he is doing the artist in residence. He's a really interesting guy. He has Down syndrome. He's a professional photographer and a disability advocate. Fantastic guy. Listened to some of his stuff yesterday when I was pulling this up, and he's a really interesting guy. If you have a chance to get down to Kahuku unit this Saturday, worth it. Definitely worth it. Ranger guided programs are happening almost daily. Life on the Edge and Explore the Summit is happening. Go to the Welcome Center. There's a sign at the old Jagger Museum up at Waikahuna Overlook. It sometimes says what's going on. Maybe it's not out. I would recommend if you're headed up there anyway, you might as well stop at KMC. Stewardship at the Summit's always happening up there. February 21st is the next one at 8:45. And we have a festival happening downtown, the Oihana Niu Festival. This is a community event in Hilo, celebrating the cultural, ecological, and storytelling traditions of Niu coconuts. The morning features hands-on workshops including papale, weaving, Niu, grading, drum making, and digital storytelling. Workshop focuses on relationship-based documentary practices for youth and families. Our friends Poako Pelimaka will be down there. That's them in that photo right there. If you bump into them, tell them we said hi. It's an all-day event downtown Hilo. They're blocking off streets. Hopefully, we have good weather for that.
Right.
And a little something from us. We have one of our outreach events tomorrow morning. The three of us, boys, will be up early. We're headed down to Nāʻālehu for a school event for 4 hours with our hands-on volcano toolkit and our traveling AI digital literacy lab, where students will get to explore our interactive materials and have fun down there. Our goal is to empower the community with engaging volcano education and responsible AI skills that strengthen disaster awareness and preparedness. And if you'd like to join our email list, you can do that at hveri.org/subscribe. We will notify you also. You can get on that list for the next episode. Thank you. Well, for our episode 43.
All right.
There you go.
I would like to thank the Bye Grant program, as well as now the Kīlauea grant program, for their continued support of this program, as well as our digital resilience and youth development. Their support, as well as the support from viewers like you, the likes, subscriptions, the shares, all that stuff really does help keep getting more people coming through, which helps keep that whole thing going. So appreciate the support there. We did have some donations come through. Want to shout out Norm for Hawaii. I don't know, probably $20 donation on that, and a $50 over from Mark. Appreciate that continued support there, Mark, as well as 16 over from Raven. Thank you for all the support there, and I think we're got some time for some questions.
Hold on, I got one more thing before you get into the questions with Phil. This is special for you, Dane. I pulled this up for you. Here we go. There we go. Everybody wanted me to put together a little something of that rainbow. So the rainbow that came, there's been quite a few because of the rain. And so threw a little time lapse of that rainbow that came off the V3 camera. There you go.
Amazing.
Yeah, you're welcome, Dan.
Was the dude from the Reading Rainbow just turned 69 2 days ago or something?
Great show as kids. PBS.
I think that was the same day as the rainbow, so it's a sign.
LeVar Burton, huh?
Yeah. I think he's 69
yeah, great
now.
storyteller.
Yeah. Geordie on Star Trek, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Legend. Anyways,
absolutely.
Awesome.
Right on. There we go. Take us to the questions.
All right. I only got one here set up right now from Hugh. As were they going to replace the V3 because of consistent stuttering, skipping frames? That was really hard to watch. Yeah, it was. And it wasn't just the V3 either. I think Lou is the one to talk about this one.
Yeah, we've been suffering from the V3 lag for quite a while now. They're saying it's a camera issue. Well, they put a new camera in once the older one got destroyed during one of the previous episodes. So the camera that's out there now, I think, is relatively new. I think they're going to try to replace it. What's that?
I think it's a bitrate issue, some kind of setting issue to the.
Yeah, it's a setting issue
to the stream. Yeah, it's something. It's not hardware. It's software somehow.
Because the V1's doing it as well.
Right, it's doing it as well.
Mm-hmm.
There's something happening in terms of what the thing's sending and what the stream is receiving that's desyncing somehow.
Now I'm going to give them some credit. They are scientists. They are smart, very smart people, but they're not live streamers. For them to pull off 3 live streams at the same time going, plus throwing videos, hats off. They got it up and they're running, and a little jitter here and there, we can take it. We got some amazing views.
All right. I think with that, you can get into our back half.
Yeah, sounds good. So I was going to start monitoring by talking about the updates, and actually going back to last Sunday, in our summary, there is a note about the V3 camera. They're experiencing data issues and having a new camera ordered to replace it following episode 42 right there. So more to come on this, surely. So picking up on the updates, this is where we were last week when I noted that there was magma high in both vents, visible spattering and small overflows, documented right through there several times on the 14th there and the morning of the 15th. This was just ahead of the onset of eruption, which was around noon continuously, or noon with the first overflows, around 1:20 continuously, and then 1:50 vigorously. So at 2:03 p.m., the USGS puts out their volcanic activity notice, paired with their notice for aviation, noting the onset of episode 42 and current conditions, which at the time was noting plumes potentially to 20,000 feet high, 6,000 meters. But at that exact moment, had not gotten to that height quite yet there. So this was the 2 p.m. update. So then there was a status report issued at 2:58 p.m. Amid the report, amidst the eruption episode that notes that the episode was continuing, precursory activity, overflows. And what it's really saying here is as of 2:45 p.m., fountain heights are getting to 1,200 feet high, producing ash and tephra, most of which is dispersing to the southwest under the influence of relatively strong ground level winds from the northeast. This is the real concern here, is an update on the tephra potential for fallout. The plume top has reached over 15,000 feet above sea level and may potentially spread fine ash and palest hairs in other directions, depending on the ultimate height reached. No public reports at that time, right, as of about 3 p.m. there. So 3:15 p.m., there is another volcanic activity notice put out by the USGS, also paired with a notice for aviation here, where they're still noting color code orange. But they are also noting National Weather Service reporting a plume reaching 35,000 feet above sea level. Ground level sensors near the vents show trade winds from the northeast, but above 18,000 feet above sea level, winds are from the west and may distribute material to the east. And this is the main reason why they put this alert out at 3:15 p.m. in the middle of the eruption, even as it was beginning to reduce in fountain heights. And so moving forward, at 11:44 p.m. is the final set of activity notice paired with aviation notice as well, announcing the end of episode 42 at 11:38 p.m. After a little less than 10 hours of continuous fountaining there. They promise more information on the next update, which comes in the status report just after midnight as we turn to Monday the 16th Hawaii local time. There they note episode 42 started and ended, currently paused, with limited tephra outside of the national park's closed area. So there's lots of details kind of all through here. It's going a little bit in backwards order. So I'll start at the beginning here. Initial activity began February 14th at 1:05 p.m. with a very short, small overflow from the north vent, followed by 2 more overflows at 4:41 p.m. and 5:56 p.m., lasting 9 and 6 minutes. Intermittent spattering continued throughout the night and up until fountains began. Overflows from the south vent resumed in the morning of the 15th at just before 4 a.m., 3:51 a.m., and 4:06 a.m., both lasting a few minutes. 3 or 4 tiny overflows prior to noon, which is when the north vent vigorously overflowed from 12:13 to 12:22. Followed by south vent overflows at 12:20, a dozen precursory flows prior to with only a few short breaks before the flows became continuous from the south vent at 1:08 p.m. and north vent at 1:20 p.m. Fountains are 60 to 70 feet high, 20 meters or so, and until around 1:50 p.m. when the north vent grows rapidly, exceeding 100 meters, 330 feet. By 2:10 p.m., 15 minutes later, it's twice that tall, while the south vent stayed small until just before 2:30 p.m. when it shoots up to equal the north vent in size, exceeding the north vent by 2:40 p.m. and remaining higher for the rest of the eruption. Peak rates around 3 p.m., significant heat and ash from the dual fountains, the plume reaching 35,000 feet, 10,600 meters, according to the National Weather Service. But hard to measure the exact fountain heights because of rainy and cloudy weather. They say south vent up to 400 meters, 1,300 feet, and north vent up to 300 meters or 1,000 feet. Somewhere in that range, but fortunately that rainy and cloudy weather and trade winds also reduce that impact of fallout on the local communities here. So that is how it began there. Then jump back up here. The fountaining stopped at 11:38 p.m. on the 15th. The south vent dropped rapidly, then jetted back up for 30 seconds between 11:34 and 11:36. During the last 2 minutes, activity from the south vent was mostly narrow jets. The north vent began to slowly drop in height, but jetted back up about a minute before the episode ended. We saw this with loose footage here. And after all that, the episode ends after 9 hours and 48 minutes. Both vents active for most of the eruption. An estimated 15 million cubic yards, 11.4 million cubic meters of lava erupted, and covering at that time 50% of the crater floor. We're recording 33.7 microradians of deflationary tilt during 42, which is probably doesn't mean much to you unless you've been tracking this. This is the highest number we have seen yet of deflation in this recent phase of them. So big drop, a big output of lava there. And that's the story of it right there. Through midnight, that day, night after eruption ends. But there is a daily update that comes about 9 hours later, that Monday, where they say, okay, well, it's still paused. We can't see what the forecast will be, but it's likely 2 to 3 weeks away. However, they note upon the end of fountaining, flames were noted issuing from both vents for a short time. Bright glow continues, and there is robust degassing plumes from both vents as well. Lava flows remain incandescent and continue to spread across the floor of Halemaʻumaʻu crater, covering another 10 to 20% along the eastern margin of the crater. So if you're keeping track there, that's 60 to 70% of the crater floor fully covered after all is said and done here. Lava in place around and above the vents also continue to move downslope into the crater throughout early morning hours, and incandescence on that floor remain for several days, while flows may also continue to move downslope during this time. So that's really most of it right there. They estimate emissions were likely in a range of 100,000 tons per day, similar to previous episodes, but now back to the typical inter-episode range of 1 to 5,000 tons of SO2 per day. So that's the story, the joint story between two reports of what happened during 42, and pulling us back to today's daily update, where they noted that because the tilt has been relatively flat over the past day or so, deflating by half microradian, in fact, that has extended the forecast window, right? So now the earliest date is March 5th, 2 weeks away from today. And the latest is March 20th, which is 4 weeks away, 1 month. Today's February 19th. So really, it depends on the resumption of inflationary tilt to narrow down that window and more accurately hone in on where we're going to be starting from and how soon we might get there once we get back on track. So for now, it's a pretty wide window right there, 2 week window in 2 weeks from now. So we'll await more data for that. That is really all we have here. I think there's just one last thing out of, maybe it was this status report right over here, right? Only light tephra was reported communities southwest of 42 compared to the widespread heavy tephra fall associated with episode 41. There was fine-grained ash and Paley's hair in 42. 42 was similar to, but slightly smaller than 41 in size, style, fountain height. I think that's all true. Volume, I think we can revise that to probably not as much the volume, right? But it actually was shorter in fountains, right? It actually was shorter in output rate, maybe a little bit higher in volume because it lasted a little longer in the end there, right? They didn't know this midnight, that first night yet. But otherwise, a principal difference impacting tephra distributions appears to be the presence of light Kona winds from the southwest during 41 and strong trade winds from the northeast during 42. So really just that, preventing that material getting into the upper atmosphere to get carried. We had the winds from the west blowing that cloud over to the east, but nothing fell out of it. So none of that stuff made it up there, right? That's kind of how I read it there. So that's really the focus here and why there is all this extra activity around tephra this past episode here. So looking at our data, Here's the past week. The crater elevation last week was totally zoomed out. We couldn't see anything, and now it's really zoomed in because we've got the noise off the screen. So now we're seeing the variations of error within the instrument from the daily cycles of who knows if it's temperature or exactly what. So it's basically an average flat line right through there, an average there. So it hasn't changed a whole lot. The laser is not pointing at the right spot for that one, looks like. Whereas our tiltmeter does pick up the typical pattern. Here's our inflation before the eruption. There's a slight deflation right there. Slow down, it resumes. And then here it comes finally on the 15th. There is our almost 34 microradian drop right there. And the resumption we had in the 2 days since it, right, coming up quite a bit, something like 8 microradians or so. And then just in the last day, flatlining and very slightly dropping right there. And so that's really interesting. Come more on this in a minute here, but coming through our week-long time frame, earthquake counts have been relatively steady, not much change throughout this window here. You got to ignore the edges. And if you look on the depth versus time plot here, you see fairly constant with a natural randomness in that shallow band there, and similar in the deep band of Pahala with maybe a little bit more gaps down in there, which maybe leaves a little bit of this pattern, but really not a whole lot to worry about there. Right, our average per day long term, years and years, is about 20. So we're actually below average in some of these times, even with recharging for the eruption. So over the last week, there were some earthquakes under the summit. There were more under the flank south of the summit, and also continuing normal amount under Pahala, right over there. Here's the last month of data now. So you can see a little bit more of the daily variations happening here. You can see the long-term trend, something like that, right? So there is a little bit of settling of the ground of the crater floor there, maybe as it's sagging beneath where the laser is pointing. And it's doing so, in this case, you can see over the last month by, let's put our average somewhere right in there, right? So that would be somewhere around 1,012 and 50 centimeters-ish, something like that. And we're dropping down to maybe 25 centimeters in a month. Yeah, it's not nothing, right? It's not a huge amount, but it is still moving quite a bit. Everything's moving down there for one reason or another. So here's the last month of summit and East Rift tilt. So we showed the summit pattern already. Here's when we had those earthquakes around the summit. They were pressurizing. We were wondering, might something different happen? And it didn't. Back to the same vents. And here is the decrease just ahead of 42, there and there and there again. And then the resumption from 42. And actually here is our current flat line, which is a little sooner than we've seen in any of these previous recovery cycles, coming in a little earlier right there. So we'll see if that means anything long term. We'll have to wait and see. But we see it there on the summit signal and the summit signal at Sand Hill Southwest. This green line up this plot is Punaluʻu crater and is not showing any of that corresponding. It's just going down a little bit, and maybe some weather variations happening through here too, but overall nothing really notable on that signal. So for the last month, see there is our episode there, about right there and here. And there's not really any change in earthquakes before and after, notably right there. And so that seems to have broken that pattern, where it was pretty steady in the shallow band across the whole pre and post episode there. Okay, so last 3 months gives you a little bit more of a data set here to show how we recover. And here we had a little bit of a slowdown since it's 42, 41, 40, 39, 38, 37. And so before 38, we had a little bit of a slowdown there and there and there. See, 38 was a big drop as well. The next biggest one to this one we have here, actually. And zooming out even further, this is all, where are we now, 14 months of this eruption. All 14 months of it. And since the very first episodes 1, 2, and 3, when we dropped quite a bit of tilt right there, right? You can see that we haven't had quite as big a drop as this one anywhere. Maybe this one right here. Some of these come close, but none of these early ones certainly do. And so you can see that we're actually putting out more volume over time, and that's really pretty impressive to become more and more efficient. And normally eruptions kind of peter off, right? And this one just seems to be making itself more efficient instead. Long-term lava is filling the crater. And that's the plot of the laser, which is not really keeping up anymore. And earthquakes, you can see that had peaked per week at the end of last month, are back down to their previous levels now here in February. We're seeing the same pattern of extension of the crater north and south between episodes. It's resuming again, and contraction between them. And still this pattern of it actually seems to wiggle further north and sometimes further south, right? A little bit every single time there. So, but certainly further north, it's migrating. It's like a wiggly tooth. Every time a crater is filling and contracting and filling, contracting, it's like wiggling that thing and makes it a little bit more mobile every time it appears to be, right? Or that can be something that we consider for the long-term strength of the volcano, right? Like how long can it keep this up before it finds some other weakness or makes some other weakness that's easier to pull lava out of. So those are our signals there. 5 years for comparison there, but we'll talk about those and just show you a little bit of these plots comparing this, right? So we've talked about comparisons. Pu'uʻu only went for 47. Well, really it was, right, not counting 1, 2, and 3, right? 47 high fountaining episodes here, whereas we're now to our 42nd, right? And so Pu'uʻu had fountain heights increasing with some fluctuations up and down, but generally maximums increasing and then decreasing again. So if we make some comparison to what's happening here, it does not look like we've reached the peak and turned over yet, right? Our tallest fountain was just 1 episode ago, so we can see any trend of going downwards. Really, you have to wait and see on that. So that really doesn't tell us much, but it does show you how, at least in size, 42 is a little smaller than 41. If we come to our eruption rates, the discharge rates here, there is 41 and there is 42. So you can see it was just slightly smaller on average for the whole eruption there, but in the same field of play as all these other ones that are quite a bit higher, right? Than this other trend, which was already very impressive when it was erupting for much of the last year. So still on this higher population right through there, somewhere 38 right here also. And we see a bigger spread in our data as this is happening. And so there is a little bit of a parallel here to the Pu'uʻu days. They did have a little bit of a tight onset also, and a little bit more spread coming in here when they were getting to the 30s also, similar time frame, right? And then after that, they see their discharge rates seemingly vary less and reduce a bit as well too, right? To more of what the original trend might have been, something like that. So we'll see if that occurs. Like you see that 41, 42 are a little bit lower already now. Might we have a similar pattern? That is the question really, right? What might happen next? We're just looking for clues here. No conclusion from that. That's what looks the most similar of all the data we have. When you come to something like the volumes though, here we are, 42 was 11.6. If you go back to the table, timeline table, like this one right here. Oh. No, let's reset on me, but okay, I'll come back to. Go back to the table. That's the third 11.6 is a revised number right there. That's the third highest of any episode thus far. And you can see that there's been variation and fluctuation, but overall our episodes are increasing in volume over time. And in Pu'uʻu, they did that a little bit through the middle here, but then they very clearly started decreasing towards the end for much of the last 10 or so, right? And maybe even the last dozen or so if you go back to there. So we haven't come over turn any kind of corner like that. There's no indication based on the volumes that they're getting any less. If anything, third largest thus far, they're getting bigger, right? We seem to be bucking the trend there. So, and that's because as far as duration, let's focus on this bottom right one first. Here's our duration plot for our current eruption. And we had 10 hours this time. We had 8 hours the last time, 10 hours this time for that. It's not a whole lot of variation in the grand scheme of things, but a little bit where that can affect those that output rate. So this is our current eruption here, and this is Puʻuʻu right above it, right there. Just to explain, this one is zoomed in from this one, which is zoomed in from this one, right? Because really episodes 3 and 4 had such long durations that they blow everything else off of the scale. So if we zoom in, including episodes 1, 2, and 3 here, it looks like this. If we just take out 1, 2, and 3, then we have even more zoom to get this kind of view. And you can see that Puʻuʻu had this nice little variation, a nice steady, it's settled on a pretty steady length of duration there towards the end there, which is about 10, 12 hours or so. And we have a little bit more fluctuation than that, but we haven't had this. You see, listen, they went pretty clearly from longer to shorter, and we've had more variation than that in our episode this far, in our eruption this far. So pause lengths here will be the last thing we talk about. Will be this pause. So we are not. That was our second longest pause of 21 days there, right? That followed our basically 3-week pause there. Followed a big discharge from episode 41, and we talked about how this one was a little bit smaller, really, as far as discharge rate. So a big outpouring last time, big pause following it, which means that you would suspect there might be another one of these about this duration following 42 as well. So our pauses are overall getting longer, right, with some variation here, and that's not something we saw in the Puʻuʻu era at all either, right? So that's interesting to note there. It kind of falls apart there. So in conclusion, really, since thus far it's not really convincing that we're like Puʻuʻu shutdown phase at all. A couple of similarities here and there, but there's a lot of things that are not similar at all, and so it's really, there's no indication of this slowing down or stopping for this reason, right? If anything, it's this idea of how much pressure can you build? Are there more earthquakes? Can it more easily find another path outwards than coming up and building pressure through the open vents? And thus far, the answer has been no, and nothing suggesting that will change anytime in the short future here. So one last analysis of this duration. So I thought what I would do is, for the last dozen or so, take how many micro readings did the episode actually deflate before it resumed, right? So, and then how long did it have a pause afterwards? Okay, so for example, episode 30 deflated around 22.5 microradians, and it had about 16 days pause following that to recover that, right? So you can see that the more deflation you have, the more time it takes to recover. That seems pretty natural, right? So that's our average line, trend line right there, and this blue right here. So we can see that's kind of on time. 31 came earlier than expected, given how much it dropped, how many microradians it dropped, right? So did 38, whereas some of them, like 41, or this is 35 here, came a little bit later than expected, given how many microradians they actually dropped, right? And so this is a full range. And I just told you guys we're at 33.7. That's like right in there-ish. So you'd expect, if it was normal, you'd expect something like about 3 weeks-ish, 22, 23 days, somewhere in there. But with a caveat that the only most similar data point we have, 38, actually came early as well. It came at around 17 days, right? So there's your window right there, right? 2 to 3-ish weeks, presuming it starts inflating again, from when it starts inflating again. All right, so final thing is our INSAR. And we use the Mounts project for this, where you can see here various captures of INSAR for various recent timeframes. I'll just show, this is the one that spans from February 4th to 10th. This is before the episode onset, so you can really see this area in the middle here is modeled area. This is showing deformation on the crater floor itself, right? Over where the lava has actually flowed before and filled in. And overall, the pattern is, you see this green to orange to pink to blue. That's the inflation center where the volcano is inflating underground underneath this surface change. It also seems to be deflating from over here, from this upper southwest rift connector area right up here, which is interesting. Not huge amounts, but like that seems to be the seesaw a little bit of this. And so that's the window beforehand, when inflates kind of slowly. So you only see a couple, like really one one color range cycle here. If we go to the next frame, which was this one, taken from the 10th to the 16th, now we're capturing on the 15th the deflation that accompanies episode 42, and you can see many, many more bands in the center of where the magma pressure was relieved, which was underneath this central part of the caldera once again. And you can see 1, 2, 3, almost 4 bands on this side over here of deflationary cycle in that direction, right? So that's what we see. And there's all other information on here as well, which is the speckled stuff is the coherence, which is poor when you have lots of trees that move around between your satellite scans. It's also poor where tephra falls on the ground and changes the pattern of the ground in certain areas. So there is a tephra fallout from episode 42 as far as it goes on the edge of this map. And thankfully, the USGS has since released their own version, annotated here, a little more zoomed out, so you can capture this full edge of the tephra all the way down here. Right, the same deflationary cycle bands here on the INSAR, and superimpose the lava erupted since December 23rd. That's obscuring all that mess in the middle of there. So, and then from that is where we get this image. It's derived from that same data set, where now we can see the fallout distribution on a desert with the pattern of trees here shown in green, but the tephra more in brown. So there is our monitoring data, and we'll go to our earthquakes last here. And let's see here. I'm gonna have to once again reset this through the clicking section here of our update. I'll click through all these different options. Earthquake colors, depth, time units, local. We want earthquakes for the last week, so we'll have to put that in as such. We want to take off all the symbols that are not earthquakes from the map, because can you see any earthquakes on there? Not very easily. So we'll take off the recent flows. We'll take off all those instruments. And we'll have to force the earthquakes back. There they are, finally. How long will that take? 30 seconds?
1 minute.
Any of those webcam reviewers, webpage reviewers can replay that, what it takes to actually get the information you want here. All right. So here we are, colored by depth. Blues are deep, reds are shallower. Here's our Pahala zone in blues and purples. And you can see there's actually some oranges and reds in the shallower ground above it also here on the flank. Some earthquakes on Mauna Loa summit and flank, a little bit continuing there. And one in Kīlauea summit, a few on the south flank. So it's really kind of slow, not a whole lot to highlight here today, but you do see a lot of that deep zone and continuing adjustments elsewhere offshore, right? Even this one, 3.3. How far offshore is that? I don't know. 15 miles offshore, 20 miles offshore.
Pretty far.
Shallow adjustments. Yeah. So that's what we got there for the earthquakes. Let me see what the largest ones are for the last week here by loading this page. And there is our 3-4 we just saw. 30 miles west-southwest of Kona. We have a 3.0 deep east-southeast of Nāʻālehu. Everything else comes in under 3. All these are deep Pahala events. Actually, not that one. That's a deep offshore on the east side. But same kind of settling of the island from different movements. And yeah, so earthquakes are pretty low, and that's really all the monitored data we have. So, all right, guys. Do we have any more questions, discussion to have here, or should we wrap it up?
Yeah,
we
Dane,
got a
you
couple
questions
questions here.
right? Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah, I say you got questions on there.
Yeah. So 2 of these questions are really similar. So I'm just going to ask one of them, both relating to depth of the floor. But Miyama says, how close are the vents to the rim at this point? Are they getting higher each eruption? Paul had a similar question.
Yeah, they are getting higher each eruption, aren't they? How close are they to the top? I'll have to look back at one of the recent maps. So let me find out. Let me find that here. Share with you guys. Might work. There's a map. Event height below crater rim was 90 meters, 295 feet through upset 39.
A little closer than that then.
3 more since then, yeah.
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 Getting up there.
Yeah. And they're 100 feet above the surrounding lava as well, right? So whatever's splashing down from the fountain can build it up. Probably a few meters, maybe, something like that. At most 10 meters per episode. I'd say probably less than that,
right.
Probably almost 5 meters, but a little bit, because a lot of it's flowing down and away from it after that, right? And even after the flows stopped fountaining, it's still oozing and settling after that as well too. So it's probably not a huge amount higher or lower than this right now, 300 feet.
Right.
Yeah, maybe 275, somewhere near him, I guess. Educated guess.
All right, next question. This one might be shorter answer. Are people downwind really suffering more over these past several events?
Yeah, what do you guys think? I'll show you some pictures.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
I answered that in the comments a little while ago. The west side of the island, Kau up through Kīlauea, just getting pounded this year, including us in Puna.
Well, yeah, in each episode as it gets higher, it gets more exposed, those fountains, to the wind, and the further they end up going and the more of it ends up going. So from a year ago, the fountain heights may be more or less similar, but they're very much elevated from where they were. They're much more exposed, and then when the wind grabs it, it gets carried a lot more. So they were getting tephra in Nāʻālehu and all these places before, last year at this time, but not this much.
Yeah. This is 18 and a half miles, 30 kilometers to the southwest of the
That's a lot
summit.
of Pele's there.
It's a lot of Pele's there, yeah. Yeah, so the winds were actually pretty strong. Maybe kept it fairly concentrated in a narrow, concentrated band and dropped it out, but still right? Like this, when it's falling to the east, everyone is like, "Oh my gosh, look how much is falling!" And it's the same. It's just mostly in the park, but right. If you imagine like what you thought about cleaning your roof after episode 41, and what if this was like this is the 41st time that you're thinking about this over in Kau, because you got one episode that went to Puna for a break, right? Everything else went to Kau, right? So it's pretty easy to just live with it. You have to live with it. It's not only choice, right? You got to live with it. You got to figure out how to, VOG-proof your house. Figure out, how to deal with it in your commute. Figure out how to deal with it with your kids in school. Like you just have to live with it. But clearly, there's not enough attention being paid to this over the decades. That every time Kīlauea erupts and has gas, it's going in that direction. Right, and Kīlauea has erupted is one of the most active volcanoes in modern history, and we don't talk about this very much, right? So that's what we're coming up on.
All right. Well, do one more maybe. Easy one. Do you think that we're going to experience, or maybe a really hard one, an episode as powerful and epic as episode 38 in the future?
That's the money question right there.
The magic, the $1 million question.
Yeah, that's one to put to ask the audience, really, right? Like,
Right.
I mean, looking at some of the data, you say, okay, like it's actually putting out more lava and less time, like every single time, just about. chances are, yes, it's going to do something like that again.
All right. All right.
Like,
Well, that does it for me on the question side of things.
You know, like what you're saying right there, Phil, it's almost better to lean on it's probably going to happen more so than the other way, so that you are prepared.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that is thanks for that, Lou. That is a reminder of why it is we do this, right? We're a nonprofit whose mission is to improve preparedness and response. And part of that's education. Part of it's like networking ourselves all together so we can communicate during those really, really impactful times. And this is part of that as well. So thankfully, we're just talking about the impact of tephra fallout, which is, non-lethal, right, for all of us, right? So that's a great chance for us to educate and talk about what might happen, when we have a repeat of 2018, when this is all coming out of the ground in the middle of our neighborhoods and communities, and the impacts are everywhere. So thank you guys for your help today, and thank you guys for watching here to the end. So if you stuck with us this far, you haven't liked, please do. That helps us out. And otherwise, until next week, unless something really unusual happens, we'll be back at our regular time on Thursday, 5 p.m. Hawaiian time. Anything you guys want to add before we sign off here?
Nope, all good. That's good.
So from our nonprofit HVERI, for Dane DuPont and Lou Atori, I'm geologist Philip Ong. Until next week, aloha everyone.